Hello, guys. Captain Foley here, along with my trusty first officer, Commander Cockings,
Hey guys.
and our special guest star, Doug Drexler. Today, we're taking a quick look at an iconic ship, a briefing, or dare I say it, a teaser for the NX-01. We, of course, will be doing a full Trekyards on the NX at some point, but this is a quick intro to the ship, a few insights by its designer, Mr. Drexler. We will be doing these style of episodes for all of our famous ships with our designer special guests to bring you some very interesting behind the scenes look on this early famous ship.
So obviously we've all seen Enterprise, and let's get some basic behind the scenes. So this new show, simply called Enterprise, took place between 2151 and 2155, putting it a good 90 years before the adventures of Kirk and his crew. This Enterprise was designed to be the precursor to the iconic Constitution class, and the first human ship built purely for exploration, pre-United Federation of Planets, of course.
So obviously a new show demanded a brand new ship, a fresh new yet retro old look, and obviously a genius to accomplish this task.
Ah!
So, Doug, exactly when did you start
I'm the one they threw in the pit. Here, let's throw Doug in. He hasn't been thrown in yet. Oh, he's being eaten alive by snakes. Oh, God, no.
So
That's what it's like, pretty much.
When exactly did you start work on the NX-01, and how did you find out that you were tapped to do this new design for a new Starfleet vessel?
Well, I was working in Foundation Imaging. I wasn't even at Paramount when the show started. And I didn't know whether, I didn't know, I hadn't been asked back. Not that I wasn't asked back, it's just I was working. They were just getting going, you know. And so I was up at Foundation, and John had been brought in, Eves, and Michael Kudo had been brought in, and among some other people just getting going. And John did a large number of sketches of ships for the NX. And he just kept getting run around in a big circle, basically. And this could happen, especially with a ship that is the hero ship. Mm-hmm. You know, a ship of the week can be a hardship. The ship of the week, that could be a hardship. They'll focus on a ship of the week and make you do that over and over at times. But here was a hero ship of a series, and no one wants to commit because everyone's afraid to make that decision, you know? Mm-hmm. You don't want to be the guy who, you know, picked the wrong thing. But basically, John really didn't get anywhere with them. Not that there weren't good designs. There were designs I thought were fine. But they couldn't make a decision. And it was getting to the time where Herman and John had to start looking at the interior of the ship. So Mike Okuda suggested that they bring me back to the art department, and that I would bring the 3D knowledge that I had, you know, gathered I was at Foundation for 2 years, and I was on Voyager for a while doing visual effects there, but did some other stuff too, like Roughnecks, Dan Dare, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So Mike suggested that to Herman, and I got a call from Herman, and he basically made me an offer I couldn't refuse. You know, I couldn't leave Foundation Imaging at the drop of a hat. You know, you've got to give people at least 2 weeks notice. And so I told Herman, I said, I have to give them at least 2 weeks. And Herman said, he goes, oh, okay. He says, what time do you get home? So after a full day, I would get home, and Herman would be sitting on my front porch at my house. And then Herman would come in and sit like behind me, you know, and we'd be on a computer and be, you know, doing designs. And that went on for 2 weeks like that. It was exhausting to have to be at Foundation and then come back and there's Herman waiting. Sometimes his wife would be with him, and she would have to sit on the couch and wait while we were working. And Dorothy would feed me intravenously. But so when I got back, I don't know if this is all the I'm like spilling everything. I'm spilling it all right now.
It's interesting.
When we got back, we actually had, you know, I mean, we suggested other things. For instance, the Daedalus class was a suggestion, and I totally understand this, that the studio do, doesn't want to get away from a saucer shape. It's like, Jimmy Durante's nose. I mean, everybody, you don't. It's instantly recognizable as Star Trek. So there was trepidation about losing that. So that never happened. I always considered the Daedalus class to be a class of ship that happened previous to the NX, and that it's a much slower ship. It's warp driven, but it's an earlier design. But so we actually did a few designs that stayed as close as we could get it to the original series ship. We even did one that had a ring on it, like the ring ship. Between the nacelles, we had a ring. It was like the nacelles were variable pitch. They could ride on the ring. You could put them anywhere you wanted.
That is cool.
And well, actually, there's some interesting things you could do with that by turning those nacelles. You're banking, maybe. I don't know. I mean, after all, you are riding space like a wave, right? So it's kind of like surfing in a way. So if you're changing the balance of the ship, you're changing the balance in the warp field. Well, it could be interesting. The design that Berman finally chose was very, very close to the original series ship. Very close. And somebody walked in. Someone walked into the meeting and said, I won't mention any names, and said, "Oh, wow, that's great. It's just like Kirk's ship." And that was it. As soon as I got the call from Herman and said, "We're not using it anymore." I'm glad that they did, because I really like the NX better.
Okay.
Because the configuration of the NX, the minute I knew we were going in that direction, I saw that we could evolve this. It could slowly grow in to the Constitution class, instead of just all of a sudden making a jump. And it's, I thought that was really fun. And when we were, Herman was pretty busy with other stuff, and he knew I had it well in hand. And Mike and I always talked about everything on the NX. But the horror of it was that one of our post supervisors said, "Why don't we use the Akira?" I mean, it was only in the movie for a few seconds, and they literally were going to use the Akira lock, stock, and barrel. I don't mean something like it. I mean, the Akira was going to be it. And me, Mike, and Herman had a meeting, and what he was going to do was go back and fight for, we could go for a basic, with the idea of pontoons, like it has, the twin booms. We would keep that, but the thing would be to push it as much as we could towards the original series ship, which was a lot of fun, because I basically, when I was configuring it and building new pieces, I had my original series CG model in another layer. And so I would move the engines and stuff so that they were the dynamic remit was the same as the original series ship, and I could see how it looked with a secondary hull on it. Because in my head, they would go out and get their ass kicked for 4 years and then come back and make major changes, but not throw away the old ship. They would add another, the engineering hull is like a huge power supply. There's a big warp core in there. It's all about a lot more power. Overall, your weapons and everything have been upgraded. Plus, the other cool thing is that, and it's the only Starfleet ship, and makes more sense than any of the others, is that both parts of the ship are warp capable. If you lose your secondary hull, the NX can still, it just reverts to its original configuration. Yes, it was the Akira for a while, absolutely 100% the Akira. And Herman deserves a lot of credit for buying us, pushing back Mr. Berman and having Berman tell us to go ahead and blend that basic configuration. And I thought it was hilarious. It's almost idiotic, I have to say. I'm sorry and I don't mean to insult anybody, but maybe I do. The craziness about similarities is the most asinine thing I've ever heard in my life. That's the design ethic of Starfleet ships. They all look like one another. They all do, all of them. Yes. Show me, the only one that doesn't is the Defiant. The rest of them all have saucers, nacelles, secondary hulls. And someone said, well, even some of the details are the same. I'm like, dude, that's the aesthetic of Star Trek. over the years, we keep the RCSs looking basically the same. Phaser strips. We even put phaser. I mean, they're on all the ships. That's the design ethic of the show. And part of what gives the ships that certain consistency and a standardization that goes across the fleet, you know? So it's like when someone, you know, pulls out that old chestnut, it's just, they look really dumb to me because it's like, what about all these other ships that look exactly like each other?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's kind of dopey. Sorry.
Given that we've already seen ships from a few hundred years of history, design aesthetics changing and evolving, how did you approach going backwards before the Constitution class? How did you approach text from Kirk's time and then make it fit into the same universe but before Kirk? So how did you make that retroactive look?
Well,
What was your
you know,
process?
the thing there, and I thought a beautiful job was also done on the interiors and on the bridge and stuff like that. You can't, there's a lot of things about the original series that are primitive compared to today, you know? So how do you do designs that can upgrade it, but not so much that it makes what was on Kirk's ship? You know, if some other producers were doing it, they wouldn't even care about this. They wouldn't even think about it. They would just do whatever the hell they wanted. But the design work that was done did look more advanced because the audience is more sophisticated too. You know, the types of controls and stuff like that. You can't just have little, you know, on Kirk's ship, they just had little yellow and red and green squares blinking in front of them. You know, we have to have actual graphics and things. Doesn't that look more advanced?
Yeah.
You know, or we listen. I can rationalize anything. Why these people are so advanced? They're reading the patterns of the blinking, like Braille. You know.
I like it.
You know, but
Maybe in terms of the exterior, how did you approach retroactively designing the NX-01?
well, and this is an interesting thing. I get into a thing with people on the internet often about this who think that the NX looks more advanced than the TOS ship. In my mind, it does not look more advanced than the TOS ship.
No.
TOS ship looks much more advanced to me.
Yeah.
And one of the things that it's totally true is that as technology becomes more and more advanced, things become simplified. Look at the iPad. There's one button on it. One.
Mhm.
If you go
Well,
back,
4 buttons. You got a power button, 2
yeah,
power
I mean, but
buttons.
it's like if you wouldn't, the first time you get it, it's like, what the, how do I, you know?
Yeah.
And then you find out it doesn't even have a manual. All you need to know is how to turn it on, and it becomes self-explanatory. The TOS Enterprise is sleek, like an aquatic animal. It's like marine life. It's got a surface that's like a porpoise. It's smooth as a baby's ass. It's totally smooth. That smooth sleekness to me looks more advanced. You look at the NX, and it's very gnarly with plates, and it's almost an ironclad compared to. Plus, the other thing is that this ship really was welded together.
Yeah.
Not like some of the other ships I've talked about where they probably printed it or grew it.
Yeah.
A lot of this ship had to have been printed because we have printing technology now, but it was a little more hands-on, and there may have been some welding going on as well, actual welding.
Yeah.
I think that in the time of the Enterprise D or even the TOS ship, I don't buy welding anymore. You know, I see where you could be growing things atomically. You know, you've got replicator technology and printers and stuff like that.
If you could say there's one design aesthetic that you really wanted to have included, say you were the final say the NX-01 was the final design, but you could add one extra thing from one of your original designs, what one thing would you add to make it really fit into your aesthetic for the time, do you think?
The only thing that I would have done that I was very disappointed in is that my approval model was a much brighter ship. On the show, it became very dark and like dingy looking, you know? It was very dark, and I think Enterprises should be bright and have a white suit on and a white hat and be proud and be, you know, I was always very disappointed that the ship should be so dark and murky in most shots. And, you know, they'd have it pass by very dark and it'd be this big specularity hit, which always looked great. It looks really, you know, it makes it look real. but
So they
the
can
ship
just they can just afford to paint it in space dock, then a brighter white.
I guess not. They use a new whitening toothpaste on.
Okay,
But
so I know.
but I would have made it bright. I would have made the surface. I would not have done metallic. That came down from Rick Berman. He wanted a metallic surface. I probably would have gone for the same surfacing as the TOS ship. The kind of and not a robin's egg blue like Andy did on the D, because he thought the ship often looked robin's egg blue on TOS. But it would be more of that a warm gray with some green in it and stuff like that. That's what I would have done. And the other thing was that on my approval model, the windows are bigger, the portholes are bigger. Not a lot, maybe 4-5% larger
Would that mean
than
the
they
tail
are.
of the ship was bigger, or just the windows?
Just the windows. I would have made the windows bigger. I thought the larger windows made it look smaller
Yeah.
and more vulnerable. I thought that when they made the windows smaller, it made the ship larger looking and more able to take care of itself. It was more like a child with big eyes, I guess. I don't know. I like the bigger windows better.
We know that there were plans and potential storylines set into season 5 of Enterprise, if it ever got to season 5. With each season, we saw upgrades to the NX-01 in terms of warp power, interiors, and even getting photonic torpedoes. Was there any discussion as to what could happen to the Enterprise for season 5 or beyond?
Well, one of the great things about Manny Koto was that once he came on board the show, we had his ear. He would actually listen to ideas that we had. Up until then, you weren't allowed to do that sort of thing. But Manny encouraged that we could email him or call him or even go over to his office, which I did sometimes with designs. I'd walk him over. Before that, I would have to send it through this chain of command, and someone along the way would decide they didn't like it, or they'd get cold feet or be afraid to show it to Mr. Berman, and it wouldn't even make it.
Wow.
And Herman came back from a meeting one day and said, Manny says, he says, why don't you just call him from now on? And all of a sudden, I had this direct connection to Manny Koto, and approval stuff was just flying through instead of doing things 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I got to talk to Manny quite a bit, and we discussed. I told him the idea about how I had designed the ship to be upgraded, to have a secondary increased power. The idea that after so many years they come back and they've got this upgrade ready for the ship. It's built. When the NX comes back, it's waiting for it to attach it. It still takes some time to do, But and he loved the idea. Now, whether that would ever happen, whether it was going to happen, no plans had been made on our end for anything beyond the season we were working on. So there were no plans in place to do anything, but we certainly had talked about it.
But could you see any other bit of technology finding its way into the 5th series? If you had to speculate one other piece, say?
Well, the one thing that I would do, but you can't because we've seen spacesuits in the other shows, is I think the spacesuits we've had on Star Trek are so incredibly primitive.
You want one like from the animated series where it's just a belt, a little force field.
See, that makes more sense to me. I personally, I would design a. Now, I love the spacesuits. We had a beautiful spacesuit on Enterprise.
Mm-hmm, you did.
And Andy designed a beautiful spacesuit for the motion picture. I would like to have seen us use things that were designed into the ship that were never taken into account. I told you we have cars that ride the tracks, like big windshield washing cars where there's somebody out there all the time working on things. It's not like the TOS ship where everything is designed to be worked on from the inside.
So you're saying that paint on the bottom of the Enterprise that got hit by, Trip in that travel pod in the first episode would have been fixed, no problem, just with that car.
You would have had Lister out there with that big brush.
Can't remember that story plot, Doug. But I think we're going to close this up. So last of all, how did you feel being asked to design one of the legendary ships by the name Enterprise, and in fact, the first ship to bear the name? And how do you feel 15 years later having your name be forever linked to the first Enterprise?
Well, I love that ship.
I got to jump in real quick. It's the first Enterprise you designed, and you also designed J.
The last.
So the first and the last. You're the Alpha and the Omega of Enterprises.
You know, I mean, it was a gigantic honor for me. You know, I've been with Star Trek, man and boy. You know, I was there when it premiered, and the whole it's like the Enterprise is legend. It was a little scary, I have to admit, but yes, I do love the ship. I love it. I think it really is outstanding. If I do say so myself, I have that nice model that a QMX. The QMX Enterprise. I look at that and I go, man, we did a good job. Anybody who doesn't like this is just a jerk. It's so thought out. It's so thought about. Everything is considered on it based on everything that we know. Star Trek fans love continuity. I'm thrilled with it, and I'm thrilled with the idea that people really enjoy the refit. And you know why they like it? Because they like the idea that the ship was thought about. And that to them says, hey, they really were thinking about this. Mm-hmm. We were thinking far into the future on it. And the more people find out about the NX and the refit, the more fans it has. Mm-hmm. You know?
And hopefully these shows will bring in some new fans.
Yeah, that's great. I feel real good about it. Love it.
Cool.
Okay, well, there you have it, guys. A quick glimpse at the NX and its design process from the man himself. Of course, the actual... Pardon?
More to be said another time.
Absolutely.
Of course, the actual NX episode will be along sometime down the road, but we did this just to tide you over until then. Please subscribe and like, as all those things really help us out. Also, please visit Trekyards.com for all past episodes. As always, we love having you on the show, Doug, and thank you so much for joining us. This is Captain Foley, Commander Calkins, and Doug Drexler signing off until next time. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.